Welcome to the first studio review for Unit 2, the Java unit. We are looking at Chapter 2 here. The studio is called Area of a Circle, and we're just going to write a very simple Java application that's just going to calculate the area of a circle and report back to the user. But it'll give us a chance to investigate how to create classes and write static methods. And we're going to create an area class to actually run the program. This is what'll have the main method for executing the program. And then the circle class will give us a chance to actually take some code away from area, put it in a separate class, but then create a method that we can use in the area main method. There's also bonus missions here because initially we're just going to write a program that runs from top to bottom once. It doesn't have any sort of validation for the user input. So the bonus missions will give us a chance to add validation to make sure it's the right data type, that it's actually a positive number. And then we can take it a step further here by using a loop to give them a chance to enter a new number every time they get something wrong. So we'll kind of do this one step at a time. I'm going to start at the top. I've already forked and cloned this, and I have it up in IntelliJ in my computer. And you can see here in the data types folder, there is a folder here, data types studio. So that's where we start. And it tells us here that inside the data type studio directory, we're going to create a directory structure, source main Java. So I'm going to come over here and right click on data type studio and say that I want a new directory. And I can do this all at once. I can say, source main and Java, just like that. And then you'll see that it created all of those, source main and Java. So if we go back over here to the instructions, we can see that they want us to create a new package, org.launchcode, and put that right inside that Java folder that we created. So org.launchcode. So we're going to come over here, right click on this and say new. And right here it says package. That's what we want. And we will say org.launchcode. All right, so now we have a place where we can actually put some of our classes and run them. All right, if you ran into an issue where you didn't have the option to do a package, you can, follow the instructions in this note to right click on the Java directory and mark it as sources root in order to let it, allow packages to be created. So next, we will move on with the area class. So we're going to start with just this area class. It says it should prompt the user for the radius of a circle, calculate the area, and print the result. That's all this needs to do for right now. But of course, if we're going to have user input, that means we're going to need the scanner class. So let's go ahead and start this. I will right click on launch code, say new Java class, and give it the name of area. Okay, before I do anything else, I am going to make this a little bit bigger so you guys can see what I'm typing. There we go. Okay, so we know we're going to need the scanner class since we have user input. So let's just go ahead and take care of this import statement now. I'm going to say import java.util.scanner. So you always do the package names first, and then the class is the last thing. And so now we can come down in here, and we can't really write any code for being executed until we have a main method. So I'm going to do that as well. We want the signature public static void main, and you can see that right here, public static void main with an array of string args as the parameter. And the shortcut for that in IntelliJ is PSVM for public static void main. Hit the tab key and it creates that signature for you and gives you a body, and you can start writing your code inside that body. So we'll go ahead and create the scanner object that we're going to need first. And it gets the type scanner, the name of the class. I'm going to call it input, and we're just going to say create a new object of the scanner class. And then specifically, we need to tell it what type of scanner we want. And in this case, because we want user input, I'm going to say system.in. Okay, And then the last thing we want is actually to close the scanner after we're done with our program. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now so I don't forget. And then everything we write when we're using the scanner will be in between those two. This is pretty much how you always want to approach this when you're doing user input. So we can move on to the instructions here, which tell us that we want to, prompt the user for the radius, and then calculate the area and print something back to them. So I can start by, telling them what it is that I want. I'm going to say, SOUT and tab will give me system.out.println. And I'll say, please enter a radius. And that will tell them what it is that I'm looking for. And now I can capture the response. And I also need to store it in a variable. I'm going to use a double, which is a more accurate way of doing a decimal number. I'll just call it radius. It's okay if you just use R because this is math after all. And I'll just say input.next double. So I'm saying I'm specifically looking for a double. And so it'll store that value in the radius. Then I want to calculate the area. In order to do that, I need the value of pi. I'm going to go ahead and create another double for that. You don't have to, you could just have used this value directly, but I'll use it. And then the last one, of course, will be area. And this is going to be pi times radius times radius. In Java, there isn't an operator for an exponent, so we just multiply it twice like that. Okay, so now we have the area. We just need to say something to the user. So again, system.out.println. I'm going to concatenate something together here. The area of a circle with a radius of radius is area. Okay, so now we have a combination there of text and variables, and we should be able to print this out. Okay, so let's go ahead and hit run here. If you don't have this already here, you won't if it's brand new. The only reason I already had it was because I had done the solution previously. So if you right click right here, you should see, run area.main. And so you can run it from here as well. And then after that, it should show up here where you can just access it from that top bar. Okay, so it's saying to us here, please enter a radius. So I'm going to say 5. And then I can see right here, it said the area of a circle with a radius of 5 is 78.5. I can make this a little bit larger if you can read that. Unfortunately, you have to do that every single time, but there we go. Okay. So this is working. So this is great. We have done the very first part here and successfully written this little program in the area class. But they want us to take this a step further and create a circle class with a static method that we will be able to call directly on this class from area. So let's go over to our package here, launch code, and I'm going to create another class called circle. All right. And inside this, I can create a public static method. It's going to return a double, because remember, this is we're calculating the area. So I'm going to say we're returning a double, and it really doesn't need to be, there we go. Public static double, and we'll say get area. And it's going to take in a radius that is also a double. So I'm going to say double radius and give it a body. And now we can really just move the code we already wrote here for calculating the area. Here we go. And instead of creating a variable for this, I'm just going to return this calculation directly. So I'll just say return pi times radius times radius. So we have a method now that we can call, and we don't need to put any sort of like export type thing. As long as they're in the same package, they know about each other. So over an area, I don't need to import it. I can just use it. So instead, I don't need the pi anymore because I moved that into the method, but I do want to still have my area variable since I'm using it as part of this, statement here. So I'm just going to call it, and you want to call a static method directly on the class. So I'm going to say circle dot, and IntelliJ already knows get area is right there, so I can just tab over and get that, and then I give it the radius that I got right here from the user, and then that will calculate that, store that value in the area, and we can move it. So let's run that again. All right, enter a radius, let's say 10, and we get 314.0 as expected. Great. Okay, so that is actually all there is to the main part of this studio. So if you got that far, awesome. If you would like to, take this a step further and kind of jump forward into using conditional syntax and using loops, these are the bonus missions. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to just, say basic solution, and then I'm going to comment this out so that we can write something else completely different rather than refactoring it, because the refactoring is going to completely obscure what the original solution was. All right, so for bonus mission 1, they tell us to use conditional syntax. What happens if the user enters a negative number? What if it's not a double, some other type of characters or something? We want to have an error message and quit. So I'm gonna tackle this in a couple of different ways. One is to handle, what if it's not a double, right? And then we'll also handle what if it's a negative number, but I'm going to do them separately. So, all right, so bonus mission 1, we're going to start with some, right now we're not trying to do any sort of looping. So we can go ahead and just ask them for what it is we're looking for first. Same as before. And then we will actually, handle the thing. So here's where Java is a little different than the approach for validation with JavaScript. If we're going to use one of these methods of the scanner class to get a Boolean true or false back to find out what type it is, we're going to go ahead and do that first. But this doesn't actually ask them for it yet. It just makes sure that when it is asked, it runs this first before it moves on. And this might seem a little counterintuitive, but where we actually store the input is here. This is where we actually do our next double. But this is where it's going to first check and make sure that whatever the user has put in here before we store it, that it does actually have the right type. So we'll do that. And then this is where, we can continue to go, but we also want to validate about the negative number. So we're going to write a second if block here and say, if radius is greater than 0, then we will, proceed the way we did here, where we do our calculations and print this out. So I can just copy those lines right there and say, okay, this would be the successful path. I need to uncomment that. The successful path means, they gave us a double and it's definitely a positive number. So we can go ahead and calculate the area, call the get area method from circle and print out our message. But if it's not a positive number, we want to give them a different message instead. So I could say, sorry, the radius must be a positive number. And then we still haven't really dealt with the opposite of, what if it wasn't even a double in the first place? So let's do that as well. I can say else system.out.println. Sorry, that was not a valid number. Okay. So we kind of have, two different messages here, depending on which aspect of it wasn't valid, whether it was not a double at all, and also whether it's not negative, positive, excuse me, not positive. So let's go ahead and run this, and we'll test all of these paths. So the first thing we want to do, we've just done a lot of rearranging of kind of compared to what we did before. So I'm going to test the positive case. What happens if we give a perfectly valid number? Does it still work? And yes, it does. The area of a circle with a radius of 5 is 78.5. All right, so I'm going to run it again. This time I'm going to test for what happens if it's not a double at all. So I'm going to put in oops. And then we'll see, sorry, that was not a valid number. So I'm going to run it again, and this time I'll test it with a negative number. All right, so I'm going to say, oops, that was supposed to be a negative. There we go, -5. And we get the message, sorry, the radius must be a positive number. Okay, so this is this concept of control flow where, we have these conditionals that let different things happen depending on, the logic that we've put in place, whether those things resolve to true or false. So we have now seen what happens. We get 3 different statements depending on what the user input is. All right, so that's bonus mission 1. The downfall of doing it this way is that it doesn't give the user a chance to put in something different, to actually, try again until they finally get it right. So we're going to do yet another version of this for bonus mission 2. And this time, we're going to actually use a loop so that we can reprompt them. Now, this can be a tricky concept in Java because, again, working with the scanner class, things might be a little bit counterintuitive sometimes with working with loops in the scanner class. But I'm going to walk you through it. So we're going to start out. One thing that you have to decide is what type of loop do you want? Do you want a while loop? Do you want a do while loop? And I'm going to say, I really like do while loops. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, check out the next chapter, chapter 3. Do while loops allow you to have a do section. So the structure is like this, do, and then you give it the code that you want it to execute at least once. And then you say while, and you give it the condition so that it can decide whether it needs to loop back over again. And the nice thing about this approach is that you can save, you only have to do things once instead of having to do it once outside a while loop and then do it again. The thing with this is once you're inside a do while loop, your variable isn't going to be in scope unless you declare it first. So we're actually going to declare the double radius here, but we're not going to initialize it, just declare it. And that way it's in scope no matter where we are, everywhere. So now we can go ahead and use it to our heart's content. We do want to make sure that we are prompting the user every time it loops around. So I'm going to do a statement here, but instead of just saying, please enter a radius, I'm going to say, please enter a positive number for the radius. And that's because the first thing I'm actually going to validate for here is whether the radius is greater than 0. And we'll just say, oh, I'm sorry, I did this backwards. We want it to be greater than 0, but we only want it to loop if the radius is less than or equal to 0. So that's the condition here. And, it's complaining a little bit because it's saying, radius hasn't been initialized. And that's just because I haven't added the code yet. That's okay. We're going to do that now. So the next thing to do is to check and see if it's a double. So instead of using an if, we're going to use while. We're going to do another loop, a loop inside a loop, and say, while it's not a double, so has next double, then we're going to give them the error message. The radius must be a number. Try again. And then we're going to do this thing here that I mentioned this is a little counterintuitive. We're going to do input.next. So this is not going to actually grab and store it. We're going to do that here. Like once we finally have a proper thing, then we'll store it in radius and say radius is input.next double. But you might be saying, how does that work? Why it looks like you're asking for it twice, right? Give me the next thing, give me the next double. But the way input.next works, it actually allows you to, allows the scanner to ask over and over, but then it also allows it to move on and actually use this line of code to store it in the variable without asking them twice. So this is something that was very, very tricky for me when I was a student, but I hope I explained that well. I guess I can say it one more time just to make sure. So here we are actually just checking to make sure that it is the proper type. And we're saying if it's not, then let's let them know that and tell them they need to try again. So we kind of, this is a preemptive approach. We validate first, even before we store it. And then this is where we actually store it. And input.next will allow it to go over and over again, but then still allow it to be stored here once they actually get it right when this evaluates to false. Well, when that evaluates to true, and therefore this entire thing evaluates to false because of the negation right here. Okay, so we've moved on. We have a radius, and that means that the only thing it's got to evaluate now is whether it's actually a positive number or not. And that determines whether this entire thing is going to run again. But then after that, we can actually, once it's moved on and validated on both counts, that's where we can do our, final lines of code here where we, calculate the area and print out the message. So I'm going to do that here. There we go. Okay, so we now have the area, we've got our message, and we still, that's the end of this version of it. Now I need to comment this out before we run anything, because otherwise we're going to have two radiuses. There we go. Okay, so we're just want to make sure we're just running just this part. So let's go ahead and try this out. And, again, we want to make sure this works for all three cases. If it's a valid double, if it's not a double, and if it is a valid double, but it's not positive. So I'm going to run it. And let me move this up so we can see what's going on. Okay, please enter a positive number for the radius. So let's do the happy path. I'll say 5. And we get the area of a circle with a radius of 5 is 78.5. Okay, so that's fine. But what we really want to test is, does this thing loop properly, right? So let's go with some of the other cases. What if I put in oops instead of a number? It'll say the radius must be a number, try again. And then it gives me a chance to put in something different. So now let's try a negative number. I'm going to say -5. Please enter a positive number for the radius. So this is where that do while loop is looping around. So this time, I can say, sure, I'll give you 4. And then it finishes and it actually closes the program. Okay, so that is how you actually can do validation using that scanner class. And this approach is time tested, but I know it's not intuitive, but I hope that this has helped you kind of understand how you can do this with with a do while loop, how you can handle the actual scanner portion of things by using this Boolean method has next double, and then also using the next method to make sure that it can go over, but then also allow you to wait until it's validated it before you actually store it in a variable without asking the user twice. Okay, so that's it. I hope this has been helpful, and I will see you in the next one.